we are talking about the Necronomicon and
And other cursed books.
and possibly other cursed books, because, or at least magic books. So
Yeah.
the definitive thing about a grimoire, at least a Solomonic grimoire, and most of what other people think of as grimoires, I suppose, because there are modern grimoires, of which the Simonomicon or the Necronomicon written by Simon is one. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But usually they contain spirit lists. They're books for summoning spirits. So probably, I mean, the people are probably more familiar with the idea of the Necronomicon because of the Evil Dead.
I
That's
was actually
why
going to
I'm
ask, was that
familiar.
the book in the Evil Dead? Okay.
Yeah.
In Evil
I-
Dead, it's called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Is that right?
Well, they changed
Yeah,
it in they. I think it was like something else in the first Evil Dead. It's like not Necron something. It's not straight up Necronomicon. Obviously, it's
Okay, yeah.
infer from that. Then they kind of changed that to the like. It's just like it's a weird cult book that the archaeologists found in the and left in this cabin that's abandoned.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in Evil Dead 2, which is also like, obviously if people don't know the Evil Dead series, obviously not like a direct sequel, but more like just it's like a remake of it and with extended stuff. And that they use is the Necronomicon. Like, it's like
Okay,
the
yeah.
book of the Necronomicon, just with the Book of the Dead, it's like,
Yeah,
so it's like,
yeah.
which I think is like, but yeah, it's like, that's my, intro into that stuff. Evil Dead 2 being probably one of my top films. I love it's just like it just combines
great
all of
movie.
the things that are weird and that's more about like
Psychedelic nightmare.
yeah, and the the accidental, and I guess I mean the weird thing is like that fear of like, oops, accidental evil, like you didn't do, and having a really
Yeah.
bad day, just on
Which
top
is
of it.
which is actually
It's
the
like, which is,
opposite of what most grimoires are. So
right.
most of them is actually it's hard to summon a freaking demon. Like like you don't just like flip through a book or God forbid play a tape. Play a tape of someone reading the book, and summon
Yeah,
the Evil Dead or the
well, so yeah, specifically one of the demons,
or the old
demon
ones,
in
for
the
that matter.
woods. Yeah, like the woods
Yeah.
demon or whatever that is. It's like, I guess is
Oh
the
my God.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean it's so the Necronomicon, so the idea is you've got, so here's Lovecraft's telling of it. It's like there's this guy, oh God, what's his name? It's they call him the Mad Arab because he goes and he's studying this. He's like he's not okay, I'm gonna have to like straight up look it up because his name's escaping me right now. He's not satisfied with it's the year 700, and he's not satisfied with the spiritual knowledge of the day, and he goes on this restless quest looking for the answers. And he goes from town to village. He wanders the deserts. He does all kinds of weird stuff, and yeah, Abdul Alhazred. He's the Mad Arab. And he eventually winds up settling in Damascus and penning the Necronomicon. And it's all this stuff. Now, Lovecraft, like he loves to be, is pretty ambiguous about what the heck is actually in it. It comes up.
Well, it's
in
like sort of a
stories.
MacGuffin in a weird sense. So like,
It is,
right?
it
It's like, I
is.
mean, it's just basically like it. Yeah, it's like in different things. It's referenced. Like
It's
different people have
threaded through-
various copies of it that are
There's
not.
supposed to be
you
like
know.
5 copies on the planet, and there's another rumored one.
Yeah, there's
like,
translations like John Dee translated one or something like that.
Yeah, or
like-
attempted to with lots of
Yeah.
errors, and like there's all this stuff. Now, John Dee of the Enochian,
Who's a real
scrying.
person.
I think we talked about him when we talked about Bloody Mary. I don't know if we did, but we talked about Bloody Mary. But yeah, so yeah, and who is a real person? He was from like the 1500s.
Yeah, Elizabethan era, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My history isn't the strongest. I'll lean on you for that. But that being said, the yeah, so uh, there's this idea. He pens this book, and so what's in it, it at least includes certain things for summoning the old gods, these old the old ones who are like so super ancient, and they probably came from space, and their behavior is correlated to cosmic bodies, and they kill you and stuff. you know and so it's not like it's anybody's guess why you would want to actually summon these things, not to jump to where we'll inevitably take this. It's anybody's
Yeah,
guess why
yeah.
you'd want to summon these particular things, but there are relationships, and of course it's not hard to guess why you'd be nicknamed the Mad Arab for writing for writing down formulae for summoning these things and eventually being eaten by them, if I'm not mistaken. That's how he goes out. He's eaten by them. He semi worships them, but I guess it's kind of like I don't know, like a do yourself in cult kind of thing. Worshiping the old ones. So not recommended, but it's related to, okay, so real world, there's the idea of the jinn. And the jinn, and I will be a little out of my wheelhouse, but the jinn is a spirit in Arab lore, that they're the spirits that were not cool with people and people's relationship with Allah. They were not cool with it, or at least in later, in later telling, with Allah, and so you wind up with these pissed off spirits that get banished to the desert, basically. And so you might happen upon them in the desert. They have power, but they don't like you. They do not like you. They probably wish bad things for you. So again, why would you want to work with this kind of thing? Because they have power. And if you have the kind of magic that can make them do what you want, then, and so there's real world magic around this stuff, which is, I don't know, I'm not going near the jinn. My version of those, though, would be probably the Goetia or things like it. And so the Goetia is a part of the Lemegeton,
The Megatron. No.
the Megatron. See, there's a tie-in here. The Megaton, which is it's a grimoire that includes spirit lists, spirit catalogs, and there are the spirits of the Goetia. It's the lesser key of Solomon. This thing. They're the spirits of the Goetia that we're very familiar with. A lot of them. And they show up in things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that. They get borrowed in lots of anime, and they just show up. These are like, spirits like now watch me call one that's not in the official list, Azathoth, or Astaroth, whichever form, so I mean, grimoires throughout have these spirit lists, and but that's not a bad one to start with if you're interested in messing with these kinds of things. Messing with these things being weird magical practices, not to refer to messing with the spirits of the Goetia as messing with these things. I wouldn't. Yeah.
So let me interject for a second. So
Yeah.
my understanding of the
Necronomicon.
My understanding of that is it's a fictional book that was part of H.P. Lovecraft's literary units, we'll say.
Right.
And it sounds like there are other grimoires which are also spirit summoning texts, right? I'm getting that.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Which
there
are
are
not
these
fictional books.
Okay, so there are other non-fictional grimoires that really exist that allegedly do what the Necronomicon could do in the books of H.P. Lovecraft.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. In fact, the claims in some of the grimoires are like insane, like invisibility, the power to fly, the power, like, I mean, like really like Acts of the Apostles type stuff. you know, um,
you mean shaking people down for money and then killing them?
or
It's
breaking into prisons. Yeah,
it's
power to break into prisons. Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. All these things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You didn't give us your money. Boom. Yeah.
God now kills you. Yeah, that sounds right. Sure,
That kind
that's
yeah.
the official story.
And the thing is, when
It's
it comes to the grimoires, a lot of times, so you're talking about Christian Europe by the time a lot of these things are being written. Although they most certainly have their roots way before that. We don't have books from 5,000 years ago about how to summon things. We have books from the year 1100 or something like that. That's probably pieced together older stuff that's like put together in a very like hodgepodge kind of way, and then it gets mixed with a lot of Christian stuff because it kind of had to be, and also because grimoires were largely preserved by the monasteries because they were also thumbing through these things for tech to use because they're in the business of dealing with spirits.
Well,
It's kind of like finding a manual for like how to build really kick-ass ships, and it's like, yeah, technically it's a rival nation, but like the ships were kick-ass. Like, I'm not throwing this out. I'll go look through this. I'm gonna get the best tech. I'm gonna see how it works, and then I'm gonna put it in my own notebook. And that's kind of you have these books that show up that look like they're basically the working books of people doing this stuff, particularly when you get into like the cunning folk in I'm just gonna say the UK. I'm not getting into what was called what.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say the UK.
I was gonna say, like, let's just can we wrap to like a point? I think like something like we're missing. If we get back to like the Necronomicon or what you were saying about these things, let's just talk more about the idea of like the aside from the demonic element of it, but like the cursed book element, right? Because that's part of what is kind of about this thing. It's like, because I guess like Lovecraft sort of pulls this off of that, like what like The King in Yellow is like the inspiration sort of for the Necronomicon, which is like a series of short stories about this play that when you read it, like you die or whatever, like this is like the curse, like there's this, it's like, and it keeps cropping up in different things, or when the play is played, like something horrible befalls you. And that's similar to like, if you use a Necronomicon, right? It's like you end up going mad or encountering demons or things like that. But there's also like this element where, like you were saying, even in this when people are pulling these old books, like they're in like more like Renaissance era, but they're pulling medieval manuscripts and they're reading through them. Some people were dying, but it's also because like things were like lead painted things and they were like touching stuff,
like
and
Name of the Rose type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's. But I mean, but that was happening. There are these things. I mean, a modern example of that, well, I'll say modern in relative terms, is like Marie Curie's her notebooks have to be kept behind lead because they're so radioactive. You can't interact.
Oh my!
With them. So it's like because obviously she was studying by radium and like it's like so there's like so there's That's like funny. So there is this element of like certain books can like of these things can have things that will
they're
befall.
old and they have mold spores.
Spores in them. And you get sick and you die. It's like but there's it is kind of a weird like thing. But I think something interesting about the like not just in like the Lovecraft stuff and all this thing is like there's this really like idea of like if you think about books also as being this kind of like technology, right? There's this fear of that, like this stuff can make like there is a point where something can like be so like corrupting in your mind that it like literally causes you to like lose touch with reality, like like a book or something like where it can make you go insane. Or turn you into something else, like like it could, it's like because that usually is kind of what
member of society.
Yeah, that's usually what kind of befalls people who interact with these types of things or stuff. It's like they don't usually end up in a good way. They usually end up dead or a murderer in jail or in an institution or like things like that. It's like it's never a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like these things because they tend to be horror stories. Like that's you know, but yeah, I mean,
But it's
it's
the
really weird.
unknown, right? It's like the unknown can make you like, these evil demons that exist outside of space and don't die.
Yeah, and it kind
It's
of
like it's
does go
so
back to that.
scary,
Yeah,
It's
it goes back to that. Okay, no, this is I don't know how far off course. Maybe it's not that off course. Hellraiser, the freaking
no, that's not that far off.
Cenobites, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Cenobites.
yeah,
Um, okay, so they exist in this the liminal space outside of normal time. They're kind of Lovecraftian
yeah,
in there, like they don't have a morality. They just have this weird agenda that no one understands. They're frightening. They come out of nowhere, and you can accidentally summon them by figuring out the puzzle.
yeah. But
And
another weird MacGuffin kind of device,
yeah,
Yeah,
so it's kind of like the idea of reading names in a book or playing a tape of someone reading names in a book, and it summons things up. Okay, well, that's very different than the real experience of Western grimoire magic, which is largely like being in a room for like several hours, like with lots of incense, like peering across a room, chanting names of God, all kinds of weird things from all kinds of different cultures pieced together in a way to try to like make something show up. I mean, it's hard work. Oftentimes, like the medieval processes involved multiple people, and getting caught doing this stuff probably would get you killed. Like, I have enough books on the shelf over here to get me killed like so many times over. Any one of them could have led to a horrible death just having it, you know. And it's like, because yeah, these things were considered really dangerous. And also, as you said, sir, good sir, very powerful tech. And it's kind of like the idea, I'm sorry, I'm using like a very like cliche expression, but like, you know, electricity can cook a man's dinner or it can cook a man. Like,
yeah.
it's that kind of an idea of like it can do you in the so-called double-edged sword, It's and I think it's the Faustian thing. It's the thing that's around all of magic, but the idea, one of the dangerous things about magic when it comes to the lore of the magic book that just reading the damn thing will give you power, is that, I mean, what an appropriate time to be talking about this with people that are scared of books. Yeah, but the magic book, it's the role-playing game that's gonna turn you into a demon summoning occultist. It's the like
Yeah,
all this stuff.
accidentally,
It's the
like
same
right.
story. It's like what's the
Yeah.
object, and with what ease, Is it the puzzle box? Is it the just being curious about the stuff, just talking about the stuff, the Ouija board? What's the thing that's the evil haunted thing?
Well, there is like a weird like curiosity slash like academic anti like it's almost like in a weird sense it almost feels like it's like sort of like anti-intellectualism, like or something like that. Like it's like because if you know too much, that's it. Everything goes wrong and you lose it. And like, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
think of tech. It's almost like
It
kind of
goes
like
back to
modern
like
stuff with like
freaking Gutenberg.
yeah, like yeah, there's almost like the stuff with like modern stuff with like kind of like the AI stuff. It's like, well, AI is probably going to make a lot of people lose their jobs, but the thing that people tend to glom onto is like, well, what if it just wipes out humanity? It's like, well, we have lots of things that could do that pretty easily. Humans are pretty capable of wiping out humanity without
It's
AI.
always in progress, it seems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Killing
it's like,
each other for generations and
yeah,
generations.
yeah. I mean, inventing newer and newer tech that can destroy us all. But that's the thing. Like people more glom onto is like the almost like the demonic version of it, where it's like, if oh no, we might hit this tipping point, and then AI will just destroy us all. And it's like, well, we've already hit the tipping point of us destroying us all, so we can't really like, it's like I think like we don't like maybe we should worry about more of the actual impacts of it in like a economic way, but it is kind of has that the computers summoning demons, essentially, that we don't understand fully how they work and what they want, and they're going to wipe us out.
I mean, there's even a thing. IT people either love irony or have no sense of irony, but like there's a thing, what's the demon? Danny C, tapping you. Isn't the demon is a thing in the world of technology.
It is.
Because they play a lot of video games and read a lot of sci-fi, I think is one of the things especially the early versions of the internet.
And I've only seen it in writing. I've never actually heard it in dialogue. So I don't know if the correct pronunciation is Damon or Demon, because if my memory is correct, it's spelled Daemon. And I haven't touched those in many years, but I believe it's all about like scheduled tasks basically, or scheduled scheduling things that happen automatically. Yeah.
Now, talking about things that are probably from pretty old stuff and weird spellings of demon. I mean, it wasn't weird for them. Ours would be weird. Then the word daimon, the Greek word daimon, shows up as one would suspect, in the Greek magical papyri, also called the PGM. And that's an old group of stuff. It was a workbook of probably a working Egyptian priest that was making money on the side doing magic stuff, which was actually seemingly kind of common at the time. And he had all kinds of cool stuff in there. And a lot of it is not, I mean, some of it sounds scary, like the headless rite sounds scary, but it's a kick-ass exorcism rite. And these are the kinds of things that would be in grimoires, which is why they were proliferated and reproduced by the monastery world. But the
I actually went to I was gonna say I went to a museum exhibit on Egyptian, like I guess like we'll say like practical or house magic, and it was all like different things, like objects used for different like things like to cure stuff or to stop you from being like bad things happening to your house, and all this like weird stuff that was like the lower end of not the like the ritualistic kind of stuff, but like that, like just like that this is like kind of a fairly common thing. So I guess someone had to be selling them this stuff. Someone had to be peddling
exactly, and it was very, very very welcome in Egyptian society of the time. I wish I knew exactly which time I was talking about in this particular instance, but at any rate,
probably like late kingdom. I think it was like probably.
That sounds highly believable. Yeah, I think right around Thebes is where we're talking about geographically. But there you've got the daimon showing up, and you've got like the agathos daimon, which is the good spirit, and it seems to be there are lots of these things that are like summoning God as like kind of like the only God, but they're clearly different gods, but they're in the same collections. So it's just kind of like, at some points you say this is the creator God who made all things and gave the spirits of the zodiac their shape and all this stuff, and it's all this weird, these things just like stitched in there, but it's like lots of old stuff. And so when you get to, so I want to circle back to this idea of the cursed book, Mr. Miki, as you brought up. There is a book that just is being published, and it's the first time it's like being widely available in any kind of translated published form. And I can't think of the name of it, but Stephen Skinner. So today's date, so people can look this up and figure it out yourself. You don't have to do some work. If you can't do this work, don't try summoning spirits. It's May 8th, 2025. Stephen Skinner just released a book. It's a grimoire, and it's like the first 2 parts of a 5-part thing. It's cursed. Everybody that tries to publish this thing, I mean, like, if I'm not mistaken, he's had containers containing the book go missing, or he's worried that they might go missing when he's being interviewed. it sounds great. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy. I think it's still in pre-order right now, but it's if it's not out yet, it's just about to come out. And I'm not going to look it up for you. You have to look it up yourself. You have to do some of this work, because if not, you're never going to survive the hours of incense.
Well,
You have to put
we
in.
I
won't
certainly
make it,
won't.
we'll make it a little easy for the
Yeah,
people. We'll
not
throw
for
we'll
you.
throw a link
Not for
down
you.
in the description so people can easily find that when they're looking
Yes,
for
we
it.
will. We'll research it ex post facto and post it up. Which, I seem like a person that needs more caffeine, don't I? I'm gonna stop talking for just a moment, and when I come back, I want to talk about, is the Necronomicon fake or fictional? Because we have to talk about the Simonomicon a little. Abdul Alhazred. This is the plot line, right? Alhazred writes the Necronomicon, gets eaten by monsters, or whatever you want to call them. He writes the Necronomicon, bites the dust. Later on, Lovecraft reveals the secret of the Necronomicon in his stories. I believe it first appears in The Hound. To tell you the truth, I don't know if I've actually ever read it. But that is according to popular telling. It shows up first in The Hound, and in a couple of his other stories. It is a MacGuffin. It's kind of this weird thing that ties his little world together and just makes you curious about what the heck is in this thing. Now, Lovecraft was fine with people playing with his ideas. A bunch of his friends wind up creating certain versions of the Necronomicon, or I don't know if they call it that, but there's this idea of this kind of book that's out there that contains these names that you can use to summon things up, and it's got banishing rituals and summoning rituals and stuff about the old ones and stuff like that. And so then you've got, it proliferates a little bit in history, in pop culture, in the 80s. Well, so Bill, when's Evil Dead? Is that 80? Late
I think the
70s?
first one is 80. Is it 83? I think. Does that sound right?
So it's interesting. So you've got, 1970, so a couple decades
Evil
after.
Dead 81. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And yeah.
Beautiful.
So that's
So we're piecing this timeline together like detectives. So you got 1970. You have the arrival of the Necronomicon, published by an author that calls themselves Simon, and it contains rituals and things like that for summoning things and doing magic, and contains different seals and things like that. And it purports to be the real Necronomicon. And years later, the author came out with a thing called Dead Names that claims the origin story of this document, the Simonomicon. But he didn't call it the Simonomicon. Other people call it that. It's the Simon Necronomicon. So you've got, this shows up in 1970, right? So you've got 1980, 1980s. You've got the emergence of Lovecraft property role-playing games. Okay, so people took the Lovecraft ideas and they made role-playing games from them. And those...
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Let me interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you mentioned this. When did H.P. Lovecraft actually write the books? Was that, because I'm assuming that's before all this.
I think he's 1930.
That's good enough. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. And he was another one of these weird New Englanders, horror writers. But yeah, so 1970, Simonomicon writes this thing's out there. 1980s, you got the role playing games. My words are getting stuck here. They don't want you to know about this stuff. The role playing games, and then you've got also the popularity of this among, at that point, the 80s chaos magicians. So these are ritual magicians doing weird stuff. And I can't get too into chaos magic right now, but the idea is kind of like belief is what matters. Some people in this time believe one god is as good as another, and you can actually just exchange fictional gods for real ones. It doesn't matter.
It would be
It's
like
kind of this
it's like
Anton LaVey
punk
style
rock,
psychodrama to get
you
you in
know.
this magic space.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
punk rock
yeah.
magic.
Think punk rock,
But it also kind
pop
of
magic.
also coincides with stuff like, you know, like the Illuminati's trilogy and the whole
Yeah, like
you
the
know,
Robert Anton Wilson
Wilson, yeah,
and
like
like a lot of like postmodern magicians. Sorry to use
yeah, that guy, which is like very,
term,
yeah, like kind of goofy
but
and silly, you know, in a weird sense, are using sources that are kind of, you know, like more against the grain, I guess, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the idea that all this stuff doesn't have to be so serious, and you can still get results by messing around in non-serious environments, which is probably what allows people to bother even summoning up uh, any of these things. So, so yeah, so 1980s though, you have people playing around more with this. Now, I mean, the thing was published, the Simonomicon was published in 1970. I wish I actually had a graph with the escalation of like when the sales took off and stuff. But at this point, you have people like playing around with this, and it's getting more popular through the role-playing games and chaos magicians messing with it and stuff. So, but then, so chaos magicians are one thing because like they're a little more flexible when it comes to belief and pantheon and things. Obviously, you know, not necessarily contemporary ones, but like, but you know, at least in this period, and especially in like the 90s. And so, but you've got other folks that aren't so like that. So you've got one character, one curious character that's rather into the mythos of the Necronomicon and Lovecraft stuff is Donald Tyson, uh, who he's more in the world of like Golden Dawn style hermetic magic. And so it's very
Say
like
traditional, or
it's like
they
very
just
like
say,
orders. Yeah,
but maybe they just
but
said, yeah,
traditional
like,
means so many things though.
well,
Because
yeah, but I mean, for just for summary
yeah,
it up, it's like,
so yeah, like
you have to
think
you have to be
Aleister
a part of a,
Crowley is kind
you have
of
to be
part
a
of the
part of
like
a
the
group.
orders, and you're
Yeah, you get like different,
historically you're probably white. You know, you
get
lots of
rich.
expensive books. Yeah, like it's and that's the thing. So why am I talking about these people? But so Donald Tyson. I mean, now it's like you can just buy these books for like $20. You know, order them online. But the Donald Tyson though is of and sorry Donald if I'm actually accidentally slandering you here. But he's of the belief that so in the Golden Dawn tradition, the Golden Dawn system was given to the adepts and founders of the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, by the four secret chiefs. And the four secret chiefs were something like disembodied masters that maybe they're dead, maybe they're passed on or ascended or something like that. And they're giving all these magic rituals across the void. And I think it's like some people think, well, no, the four secret chiefs are just like this device made up to give people legitimacy. Like some people might say about people doing, oh, I'm a channeled entity by this name, and therefore that's why you should believe what I say.
So where
You
does
know?
it that tie us back into the Simon
So,
Obama?
so the yeah, I'm
I feel
getting
like,
there. I'm
yeah,
getting
I was
there.
gonna say, like, I
This
was like,
has to be circular. It's about the Necronomicon. Okay.
yeah.
So the four secret chiefs give this thing, and you're not supposed to mess with the format of the Golden Dawn stuff. But Donald Tyson, true believer, did with the Necronomicon stuff, at least according to his statement, like find a bunch of map overs for the Necronomicon stuff on the Golden Dawn stuff. And with tarot, like there's like a Necronomicon tarot out there and things like that. So he's kind of like he's got this kind of, I believe he's got a Necronomicon spell book. I could be wrong on that. That might be somebody else altogether. But so so even among more order-based magicians, this kind of thing is kind of still looked at with a curious eye. Now, Simon, who wrote the Simonomicon and Dead Names, in Dead Names, claims that he was involved with this group that is this group of American bishops that is the American Orthodox Catholic Church or something like that, and that he in before the publication of the Simonomicon is part of this group, and they are shadily involved in the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, or they all go dressed in this garb to Bobby Kennedy's funeral, and there's all this like other conspiracy stuff that's woven in with this weird church that uh, does is only bishops, according to I'm pretty sure that comes from the Dead Names. They're only bishops, and they're doing this. Um,
No cardinals. No,
yeah, like just these,
no
and they're involved
monsignors.
in UFOs, and like
Yes.
all this kind of stuff. Um, but
Uh,
but so you've got this weird church that one of these members has this old manuscript in his apartment. And Simon takes it and publishes it. And that's where the Simonomicon comes from. It's this ancient book. But there are people that weigh in on different sides of it. I mean, I'm obviously talking about it like you can kind of guess like, no, I don't think the Simonomicon is the real Necronomicon. I don't think there is a real Necronomicon, but there are lots of books out there that have very similar kinds of vibes.
well, can we
And
talk
actually,
about the? I was gonna say like real good that like I mean, there's sort of like a hoaxy nature seeming very much to that like right to the whole Simonomicon because it's like like it's isn't it like compiled from like literally like literature like sources that are just like stories from things. Some of it's like other stuff ripped
I
off
mean,
of other people's writings. Some of it's like it's just like it's like literally you can track it back to like isn't that kind of the and I guess like and that's the thing is like the Necronomicon's also been as it's continued its popularity, even before that, it's like a part of like people would do pranks like put it in card catalogs in libraries, so
well, yeah,
universities.
well,
It's a very
like,
pranksy kind of book as well. Like it
so
has
for a
this kind
long
of
time before
like
the Simonomicon was published, people were always they were doing that kind of
yeah,
thing,
like
and
claiming
so it's
that
like
like things like that,
so it's
or
one of these like
saying it's in
legendary
the
books,
Vatican,
like
yeah, like oh the Vatican has it or something like that,
yeah.
or like it's like it has this very like
I think
kind
yeah.
of pranks, like
So I think that the Simonomicon leans heavily on all this pre-existing stuff, and I don't know much about like whether there's, I guess what we'd call like ripped off IP or not, so much as, like it's just like heavily leans on this previous stuff because it's pretending to be it. It's pretending to be the Necronomicon, and at this point, I mean, I don't know if Lovecraft was public domain yet or not. Maybe that's why it showed up in 1970, or maybe it's because it was available from this weird church that had been carrying it around
yeah, they're
between
just like
assassination related funeral visits or whatever. I don't know. Like it very, very odd kind but like something lands about this, right? Something lands about it because
Yep.
it's this idea of it's caught on. Like so many people have liked this idea of this magic book that you can use to summon these things, you know, that yeah, I think it's but it's funny because so after you've got the 1970s, and then you've got the role-playing games, and then it's straight into the world of like Evil Dead, like right around the same time, and this sort of proliferation of interest in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean the rise of like I mean of there isn't like but like people who grew up on weird sci-fi and supernatural horror novels and things like that, and then now they're making movies. It's like makes kind of makes sense. They
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's like I mean because I mean like I think like you know like not that there isn't horror movies clearly like weird old Vincent Price things. Clearly like
Right.
Nosferatu is one of the first movies that's horror movie. Like this kind of.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I think like cinematic horror really hits its stride in the with like like Halloween and
Well, talking about cursed objects, cursed movies, cursed albums, and stuff like that, or like weird kind of the black the heavy metal album that gives you the secret magic.
you mean
You know,
the dialing it back like
yeah, yeah,
well that's again that all stuff like same thing kind of links into the same time period. This all seems to be around the like moral panic, like play a record backwards, it's giving you evil messages, like play Dungeons and Dragons and you're gonna like be it's like there's like this whole like it
yeah,
does seem like people are gonna easily you know like these things that can make you insane or make you mad, and like
yeah,
just and
yeah.
then cause the downfall of society.
Yeah, like remember movies like The Gate? Did you ever see The Gate?
I
It's
don't think I've ever seen The Gate.
Yeah, it was one of these things, and teenagers accidentally open a gate to this world that lets all these demon things out, and they're trying to fight demons in their house. And then there's a gate two that actually has something that looks a little bit like sigil magic in the beginning of it. So it's kind of funny again, like the way these things just pour back and forth into each other. Um,
So let's just say, well, since we're if it's a thing is like if something is like if the Necronomicon in fact were real, then why aren't we being overrun by elder gods? it's
maybe we are, but maybe they're just smaller and
they're smaller. They're little
and
tiny.
just
They're more like
I don't know. They
they're
want
the
to soak up.
bugs.
They want to soak up different kind of attention. You know?
Oh no.
Oh man, no reptilian stuff. No, never.
No, it's like,
Yeah.
but
Why
they're
aren't?
not elder gods. They're sort of space alien.
Well,
It's
there are people that have this idea. I can't outright dismiss it. That we gain technologies through demonic interactions, and that actually, if you look at what's going on with the agendas of the world and the escalations of technology and things like that, I'm not even talking like Illuminati stuff. I'm just saying, like, when you have a technological boom changes the shape of culture and society. And it, consequently, some people think of it as the Faustian bargain, which is similar to the dude that wrote the Alhazred. It kind of had something of a Faustian bargain. It does you in the end. It never works out kind of thing. And so the idea is like, well, you get agriculture, but now you're stuck here. You have to develop civilization around that agriculture, and you can't just up and leave when you overgraze the fields. This kind of idea where it's like you get facial recognition technology to keep your phone secure, but you're tracked everywhere. To give extremes from the agricultural revolution to some of the latest in technologies, you know, you get one of these things, these phone things for those that are listening, these government surveillance devices, and you get the government surveillance that comes along with it. No, but now you need one to park your car. And don't let me say about how the car has reshaped culture and was it a Faustian bargain? So we're these demons. We're these demons that are actually running the world and whispering in the ears of these politicians.
Or is it just
and that leads into that whole thing.
manifestation of just like again, just like the fear of tech and culture moving past you, or the fear of how tech, it's like, oh, like the books are changing the world, but they're evil. It's like it's like this is good, this is something that's like, we're doing that's altering thing, but it's probably something like, so, it does feel like it's just more like the technological idea that feeds into moral panics or something like that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Like
that's like
if
it's easier
there's a
to,
psychological underpinning to
which I guess could
this type
bring it
of
back to the idea of something like the sort of like the thing making you mad. Well, I guess like, you know, I mean, shared madness is a thing, you know, that happens. So, like, you know, I guess we could say that, like, you know, maybe technology as a, like, you know, at least, I guess, sort of like a allegory, like, you know, that it does make you insane to some degree. Not just,
well, it
like,
depends what you mean by insane, right?
well, I mean,
Because
just
you've
like,
got,
you
but
know,
because okay, so check it out. I'm the weird neighbor reading one of these weird books. You're not that person, you know. So to the rest of the village, I'm seeing things that you're not. To me, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. To you, that is batshit crazy.
yeah, but the backlash against it, like, what would be like the moral panic is like trying to put going back to like somebody said, or at least trying to put the technological genie back in the bottle.
It raises an interesting question, and one that we're not going to be able to answer, is the idea of how much magic has been in our history and how much of this stuff is like as other technologies become more prominent, some of these other things fall by the wayside. But like the beginnings of what we call Goetia were necromancy. And that is the like probably the earliest ancestor worship, ancestor veneration is probably the earliest of um, of spiritual practices, honoring the fallen and asking them for help. Um, in a world that's very much in touch with his dreams because they're not watching TV and like these are the only weird stories they get, you know, besides just being in the world. So it's kind of like, yeah, you could just construct the idea of a ghost world and people still being alive somewhere. And I'm like stepping outside of the spirit infested world that I clearly live in. But you know, just to say, yeah, there are definite explanations for like where this came from. At what point did it become weird to talk to the ancestors? That's the question I have. Because if it, you know, at what point was it not okay anymore to ask them for help? You know what I mean? And at that point, if particularly when it comes to the point of the rise of Christianity, the Common Era, you know, and at that point, you've got a piece of technology that comes around, uh, paper, that is being really used well in the monasteries to reproduce these things, to gather these things. So it's like it's when this stuff starts to be falling out of favor because maybe authorities don't want people to be able to go right to the spirits, right? And it's falling out of favor just at a time that technologies emerge to be able to preserve it. And by the time you get the Gutenberg, you know, well, it's not too much later after that that you've got, I mean, the mass availability of grimoires for many people. You know, it's historically speaking, it's a blip. So you can definitely, if you step into the magic camp, you can definitely see how there could be an agenda being worked with the spirits and the people, you know? But if you step into the psychology camp, you can also see how it actually could make sense from. So it's jumping from context to context. I think you can, there are satisfying answers in each context, depending which one works for you and which one works for you. And I think that's a perfect time to weigh in on what we think about these things. Okay, I'm going to start since I'm already flapping on. I don't think the Necronomicon is a real thing. I don't like it's a real thing, obviously. It's become a real thing because people have written them and started working with them. And I believe that some of those people might have had some really weird experiences based on that. And I think the only way to tell is to give it a whirl yourself and to do so with earnest effort. So this is the part that gets me burned at the stake in time when that seems like it's becoming fashionable again. Go out there and give it a whirl, people. I would not start with the Simonomicon. I'd start with what would I start with? I might start with like the PGM, the Greek Magical Papyri. Practicing magicians out there are going to be like, "You're a moron. Why are you doing that? Why are you recommending that? That's not the place to start." With the PGM, and then get Skinner's book, the techniques of Greco-Egyptian magic. There, that'll be enough to get you involved. That's a good start. And or just get the Simonomicon and give it a whirl. But I don't think the Necronomicon's real. Beyond that, I don't think there's a historical text. There are clearly lots of these things out there. Um, I think it points at a spirit world that is real, though. And I think you can interact with it without putting too heavy a thumb on the scale. I'm going to say, give it a whirl if this sounds interesting to you, and it is interesting to me, and I do give it a whirl. So next, somebody take the mic. I'm actually gonna turn mine off.
I'll go next. All right. So recognition. I think that many people, have heard of the Necronomicon. I cannot say it, man. Jeez Louise. Necronomicon.
Just re-edit it in, Dan. Just like Necronomicon.
Just censor it, maybe that could be fun.
Yeah.
I think many people have heard of it, like myself included, not necessarily knowing all the ins and outs, what it really is. Is it allegedly real? Is it all fictional? I think a lot of people are probably like, oh, what is it? Okay. So I'd fall into that camp. So I think Necronomicon, I think it's generally recognized. So I'd say that. Scary, I think because it's largely recognized as a fictional work. I don't think people think it's all that scary. Grimoires in general, I guess they could be scary. Grimoires, the existence, the idea of them are real. It is Grimoires, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Good. Those do exist. Whether they really work or not, I am unsure. But I will say, I will take my usual stance that I believe this world is very strange, and we obviously don't know everything there is to know about it. So, is it possible that these things they work in the way they're described to work? I think that is definitely possible. However, I've never done it with I've never done it myself, so I cannot say for certainty. Do I want to encounter it? I don't know. To me, it's kind of like the idea of the Ouija board or something Bloody Mary. Like, it's just kind of like I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I don't know that I would go into those waters. The whole thing with the djinn is very creepy. I've read and heard many stories about that, and it just does not sound like a good time at all. So I'm hesitant to do anything with grimoires or anything like that. I'd give it like maybe like 3.5 monsters. I think I'd do that a lot, but I'm going to go 3.5 monsters on this.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, yeah, I agree with you, Dan, with like the recognition factor. It's like, I mean, I might have a little more skewed basis, just obviously being like, sci-fi horror kind of fan. It's like it's gonna pop in there. But I mean, there's been so many like, even like breakout things and stuff. Like included in like modern board games and things like that. Obviously, there's the entire like Arkham horror series, and in Japan, like the most popular role-playing game is the Call of Cthulhu. So I mean, like, so there are these things, so obviously like it falls into that just overall brand of stuff that, for probably the better, eclipses Lovecraft's original works, which can be problematic at times. But I think people have morphed it, just like even using something like the Simonomicon into something beyond that scope. But overall, like, yeah, my thing is like it's a MacGuffin. There's lots of different variants of that. The idea of the cursed book, is kind of obviously like a thing that could happen in a weird sense of like people feel like I said earlier, monks dying or like radioactive notebooks, like really making you sick, like things like that does seem weird. But I think the like ultimately like the scary factor is probably like I think for me is probably like the kind of like what makes it kind of creepy is like touching these things incurs madness. Like this is like it's all like, oh, it's a one-way ticket to losing your mind. Like it's like because no matter like because if you have an encounter with this kind of idea, that's like so that's like, and yeah, maybe it is like more of like kind of a technology allegory type thing, you know, where it's like, as we progress, like there's no going back. Like there's nothing, you know, it's like this is just the way it is now, and you have to adapt. And like in that way might be like sort of like it might be seen early as like from an early adoption as madness, but then becomes a thing, and then people are afraid of it once it reaches like peak adoption or something. But yeah, but it's if if but if we're stating that something like I don't think this is real, like I'm not you know thing on it. I think it's you know whatever you make of it, like. But it's like, but if we were to say that like the actual Necronomicon was real and how it worked, I don't think I'd want to go insane. So I don't think I'd want to encounter it. I don't. I mean, or go more insane. I guess I should maybe qualify that statement. But yeah. But so I mean, like, so. My rating is going to be a little weird. I'm like, even though like this touches into a lot of like I guess like media and things that I tend to really like. I'm gonna kind of give it like a 1 on the factor of monsters because I just think yeah it's like you know it just has that more you know just it's just so vague. It's so like adaptable. It's just that you know. It's just a MacGuffin. It's you know. It's the Lost Ark. It's the thing. You know. It's just it doesn't. You know. It's just something to drive the plot forward. And it's a you know. It doesn't. It's not. It doesn't have the You know. Like I guess like extreme psychological terror that something like a boogeyman would have. You know. So I'm gonna yeah one monster. Yeah.
It occurs to me that I did not give a monster rating in all
Yes.
my chatting. So my monster rating, since this has been a very circular topic, I think it's kind of appropriate that I'd end and begin it. My monster rating, I would say 3 monsters and a headless monster, appropriately, because I'm going to say, don't start with the PTM or the Greek magical techniques. Jason Miller's Consorting with Spirits. Before you do any more explorations of grimoires, and Alan Chapman's Basic Magic for Beginners. That's where to start. That is your Necronomicon insurance policy.
Dude, that was the part where you should have been actually holding a microphone, and right after you said that, just like drop, exit.
Or just stand up. It's like
kind of CGI it.
Do you have problems with the Necronomicon? Well, I can sell you a Necronomicon insurance policy.
Yes, I can sell you a Necronomicon.
You're a Debbie
insurance
Baba.
Don't get Necronomicon.